Senator Codi Galloway. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you for coming back in. You and I got to connect at the beginning of the legislative session, and then we kept trying to line up additional interviews, and it was like you were running super hot. I'd like see you occasionally in the camera, like, oh, hey.
It's a very busy time, especially my mornings were super busy with JVAC, so I had to miss a lot of the morning opportunities. And
yeah, I've been meaning to get Senator Ward Enkelking, or Senator,
Great.
back in. She was, obviously we have the 4 to 6% budget clawback, issues, and she was in JFAC too, right? Yeah. I've been meaning to connect with her. Anyway, you're here today not because of JFAC, but because your bill regarding public area camping came into effect July 1st. It is in fact July 2nd, and here we are, like people have a lot of varied opinions about this. Some people criticize the bill because they think you're criminalizing homelessness. Other people I have heard criticize the bill because they felt like it was the state imposing things on just a very few collection of cities, and that should be like the city council issues. But obviously other people are like, yeah, it should go without saying. You can't take over a public space. Like if I buy a house and like I got to pay property taxes, I got to maintain the house, like all these things. But if I bought a tent in other places and just plopped it down in the middle of somewhere, it's like, oh no, I own this sidewalk now, or I own this portion of the park now. And your bill in effect says, hey, look, cities at a certain size, about 100,000 people, and there are like 3 to 4 of those in the state of Idaho, you cannot have people camping in public spaces. It's not that it's illegal to be homeless. It's not that it's illegal to have, a drug issue, right? It's illegal to do drugs, but illegal to have a drug issue. No, like you can be an addict. You just can't buy and do drugs. I'm not explaining this very well at all. But the point is, that's in essence what your bill does, which is, hey, you can't sleep in, you can't set up tents and essentially take over public spaces within these cities.
You got it. And it might be helpful to go back to what is the impetus or what started this. Over the last probably 5 years, we've seen a big increase in public encampments happening in the streets in Boise. And it had kind of gotten tapped down with Mayor Beater, and it had been managed and controlled really well. And then things just kind of went off the rails about 5 years ago. And many of the homeowners, business owners, people that live in certain areas in Boise were very concerned about the dirty, dangerous, and actually deadly practice of this public camping. And it really affects 2 populations. It affects the people that are camping. It's dirty, it's dangerous, and it's deadly for them. And that's not how we should treat vulnerable populations. And then it's dirty, it's dangerous, and it's deadly for the people that are living in that space, that are walking on those sidewalks to work, that are using the greenbelt for recreational purposes, that are living in their houses and just want to take the trash out, and simple things like that. So we really wanted to correct that. And we've worked with the city of Boise for years as a business district in the Shoreline area and the Irving Street. And really our pleas for help in this area were just fell on deaf ears. And so this law came as a campaign promise to friends, neighbors, and constituents that were very concerned about the direction that Boise was going in particular. And they loved Boise and did not want to see it turn into Portland. And that is what was happening in Boise. So we had to look at some legislation that would help protect Boise to make it the beautiful, safe, and accessible city that it is and can be.
Okay. Let's walk this back, because again, I have enormous amount of respect for our state legislators, senators, representatives, and in conversations with a lot of them, privately off air, they really, I felt a real hesitancy to engage in localized issues. They're like, listen, I don't want to push on this, industry. I don't want to push on this city. Like that's not what we're here for. And I came to really, really respect that. I was like, oh, okay, so even if people really like this thing for their area, that area can address it, right? And then there were issues that people said, hey, people have been trying to address this. This has become a huge problem, and that's when we need state level action. So let's walk me back. This is a concern. Obviously, it's a concern. You see it in surrounding states. And, if you've ever traveled to the coastal states, for sure. You're like, oh, gosh, that's crazy. And so we've known that this is a problem. When you say it fell on deaf ears, the concerns and issues fell on deaf ears, what does that mean? Like, were you going to, were city council people like, hey, look, we don't mind it, or were law enforcement agencies like, hey, it's not really a problem for us? Like, who were you talking to that really didn't care or wasn't taking action?
Well, let me tell you two people that did care. First of all, Councilwoman Lucy Willits. In fact, she came and testified at the hearing, and is very supportive of this. She believes, and she says this all the time, this is a complex issue, but we need housing, we need help, and we need rules. And right now we're missing the rules part of it. And so Councilwoman Lucy Willits was extremely helpful on this. Also, the policemen, they have been responsive. They are helpful, but their hands have been tied, and they will tell you that because of the mayor's position and the majority of the city council that has been very fearful of doing anything that might help this vulnerable population. They have a very housing first, and this is all about housing, and they've forgotten that there is more to the problem than just housing. And I can share letters, and I mean, we can go back to the testimony and read stories and stories of businesses and residents that have gone and petitioned City Hall and said, please help us. This is dangerous. I just got attacked. We just had this happen in my parking lot. I had a customer that got hit with nunchucks. Over and over, I have stories. Every person that works and lives in that district has a poop story. And I just had one of these last week. It was in the news recently because we had a break-in. And
sure. You everyone, personally?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I was on the radio show doing a regularly scheduled event. And my husband's sending me pictures from our business. And he's like, look what happened today. And there had been a pallet that had been shoved through the window. Glass shattered everywhere. Our installers walked in. There was a person that was had defecated and urinated all over the office and was sleeping passed out on the couch. When he got alerted, he was clearly higher than a kite and running around crazy. We had to call the police. So,
and
yes,
this was a homeless person.
I can't speak to their.
Gotcha.
I mean,
it was a person obviously with an addiction problem, right, and acting chaotically.
That had
who knows? Yeah.
Broken in, vandalized our office, defecated. This is normal. And when I was talking about this on the radio show last week, everyone's like, "Oh, this is terrible! Like, I can't believe this is happening in Boise." I'm like, "No, this is happening like all the time. Every person that runs a business in this area, every person who lives here has a poop story and they have a vandalism story." And one of the best evidences of this not being addressed by our city was Interfaith is trying to move to another part of town. And in the hearings, one of the people that was against Interfaith moving came and spoke, and she said, I did research to find out what happens when these shelters are put in certain areas. And she had requested public records requests from the city of Boise on what are people talking about here. And she said there were hundreds and hundreds of emails, letters written that were unaddressed by powerful people that have money and that have time, that have businesses in this area. And the city left them with nothing.
Oh, so
said,
through
so
the
now,
Freedom of Information Act, they were able to see like, hey, this email came in and there was no response that went back out.
Yeah, and she testified in this, and I haven't seen her evidence, but I was one of the people that had written letters, as did others, and just this issue was not addressed in a way that made any dent in the problem. And so when you say, when does the state step in? Well, the state steps in when the certain areas are not doing their job, and there's lots of ways we can step in. In Utah, this the problem got so out of hand that the state took over the continuum of care. They pulled it away from the cities. I'm hoping we don't have to do that. This is a very light touch. The legislation that we presented says it actually doesn't, there's no criminal penalties in the law for anyone that's experiencing homelessness or that's camping. It says cities, you have an obligation to keep your city safe and accessible. Do not allow public camping. And you solve that problem any way you wish. We're going to leave that in your local control. But
this is the end result. You cannot allow public camping.
You cannot do this in our capital city. We are not going to let people sleep, camp, and do all of the adjacent behaviors that come with that in our parks, on our roadways, on our sidewalks.
Okay. And again, first things first, it's not just the capital city. The capital city falls under the umbrella of who's required to do it, but there's a 100,000 person population threshold, correct?
Right.
Great. So that's several cities. It's not just, you didn't just write it. It's like, hey, Boise, we're coming after you. Now, it does obviously affect Boise, Meridian, Nampa. I think Pocatello crosses that line. I could be wrong on that, but the bottom line is that's the end result, which is, hey, you can't have public camping. Now, we're not going to tell the city council people what policies they have to put in place or how they have to achieve this end. We're just saying, as a state, this is not something that we're going to tolerate, as we've seen other states do it. You mentioned continuum of care in, I think you said Utah, and that the Utah state government took that out of the control of the cities. This is one of those times when I pretend like I know what continuum of care means, but like, what is that? And what do you mean they just took it away from the cities?
I'll give you I probably shouldn't have said city. I should have said local entities.
Sure,
because
whatever
they
it might be.
oftentimes
Sure.
carry more. The simple definition is the federal money that comes in to handle and work with this vulnerable population is given through these continuum of care organizations. And I think there's going to be some changes on the federal level of this. But right now there's different organizations that are set up, and that's where the money comes in, and that's where they have access to help and support services, mental health services, drug services, shelter grants.
So that's part of what Senator Ali Rabi calls like the homeless complex, right? She spent years in the Bay Area, in the state that shall not be named, trying to deal with working in that industry. She's like, there's an industry designed to address homelessness that never solves homelessness and just gets bigger and crazier. And she worked, I believe, she called it a technical firm that actually helped organizations. Like, say I want to hand out sleeping bags, right? I'm like, if I just get some money to like get these sleeping bags, buy these sleeping bags and then distribute them. And by the way, we need staff to like purchase them and distribute them and all these things. And then we need staff to actually help us get the grants to do these things. And her firm helped organizations like my fictitious sleeping bag firm navigate the grant process and funding process. So like, then we had to fund this technical firm to help us get the funding. So it's like this gigantic organism that's, perpetuating itself, because supplying people with sleeping bags, by the way, doesn't solve homelessness, but it's money going to homeless people under the guise of like, we have to address homelessness. It's like, you're not addressing it. You're literally just giving them a sleeping bag. Right now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give them sleeping bags, but I am saying that the concept of, hey, we're addressing
sleeping bags may not be a good idea, because what's happening right now, I went on I've met with many police officers, done several ride-alongs to help understand this problem. And we do have this in Boise. There's a big giveaway where...
Oh, like sleeping bags.
Yes, they give them away. And then the policemen have to go collect them from that they're left behind all along the Boise River. They're usually environmental hazards at this point. So actually the policemen can't go get them. They have to
because they have hazmat, like biohazard,
they have
fecal material, body fluids, things, and probably blood or something in it.
All over the Boise River. This is a horrible disaster. And I don't remember the number of pounds, but I was I'm sure we could get this through some Information Act, the amount of pounds of waste that is collected on a weekly basis down, well, not weeklies. He had a great number, and I wish I had the stat, but I won't guess the wrong number. But it was thousands of pounds of sleeping bags and kents that are given away one week, abused, left with dirty environmental hazards right in our river, and then we have to, as a city, pay to go collect and have those cleaned up the next week. So I would say the sleeping bags is not a solution. What is a solution? There are people that are definitely experiencing, that are down on their luck and need help and do not have a place to live. And that I would recommend they go to the shelters. There are wonderful shelters here in Boise. Reverend Bill Roscoe runs a great organization that helps people out of this problem. He does not hand out sleeping bags. He hands them a bed and a program and allows them to find their way back into society instead of down to our river where they can should not be.
Yeah. I had Reverend Bill Roscoe on, and man, what a human being. First off,
amazing. Just
incredible person. And he also, his take on things was, it was very counterintuitive. He's like, we have an unlimited time program. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't entirely make sense to me. Isn't like, you're just throwing money at these people indefinitely? He said, yes, because we have requirements of them. So if they're staying sober, if they're participating in the program, we will stick with them as long as it takes for them to get out of it. And it could be years. Now, what we won't do is we absolutely will not tolerate people in these types of programs that are continuing to use drugs, that aren't sticking with the program, that just, want to live a life that's going to keep reproducing bad results. And they just want to bed, that night. It's like, that's not what Boise Rescue Mission is about. And I thought that was so incredible. Like, wow. So you're like, look, we'll throw all the resources at you as long as you're on a path to progress. And he's like, that's right. And I thought that was really incredible.
And I don't want to speak for him, but I will say one thing that he testified in the hearing and is very supportive of this legislation. He knows that public camping is dangerous to this population, and he wants to make sure that they're safe as well. But he's said he does have an amazing program. I think they graduate like at an 80% rate or something phenomenal. So he is actually solving. He's not putting a sleeping bag that ends up in the Boise River with fecal material all over it. He is actually changing and transforming lives there. And my hat is off to him and his team who do an amazing job. But one thing that he also always says is there is always room in his shelter. And people will often say, well, where do these people go? What if they can't find a bed? And he said he has never turned anyone away. So however you come, there is a meal and there is a bed. And he has said that multiple times. Now, to stay long term, you have to there's accountability. But anyone at any time that is having a bad night, he always says there is always room. And I really appreciate and admire that, because we don't want to pass this law and then not have a place where people can get help. That would be unfortunate, and that is not the case. And he's testified that will always happen. There's always room. He will always find room.
He's great. One criticism that happens quite frequently in these situations is people say, hey, we have to do something, right? So let's just take the sleeping bag thing. It's like, do you want somebody sleeping outside in winter? Like, they need to have a sleeping bag. And then of course the rebuttal comes like, okay, everything you said about sleeping bags, about the biohazard, about thousands and thousands of pounds of waste and debris, and like all of the cost to the taxpayer comes up. So, hey, we have to do something. Okay, but these are the problems with what we're doing. And then the rebuttal comes, but we have to do something, right? And that usually is the end of the conversation, where it's like, okay, I'm not saying we shouldn't do something, but like, this isn't working. Then, well, yeah, but we don't have anything else to do. It's like, okay, but where do we go from here? And it seems that at some point, the recognition of an imperfect solution or the necessity for creativity as a viable solution is a real thing. Like, okay, if the solutions that we have come up with, one, aren't really solutions, and two, create enormous problems, you're not saying we don't care. You're just putting guardrails around what can and cannot be done. Yes, we need to address homelessness. Yes, we need to address drug addicts and vagrants in our communities. And we just can't address it by letting them sleep here. Now, we can address it a myriad of different ways, but you're just saying, hey, we just can't do this one thing, right? And there are many things that obviously are criminal activities, and you already can't do them. But you're also saying, look, we're not going to arrest homeless people for being homeless. We're not going to arrest people with a drug problem just because they have a drug problem. You can arrest them for doing drugs or selling drugs or engaging in terrible behavior in public or breaking and entering, things of that nature. You're like, it's not criminal to have a problem, right? But we do have rules in our society. And if we allow these rules to be broken by a certain population of people under the guise of compassion, that is not compassionate for the people who bear the burden of it, like you as a business owner, right? Like, where's the compassion to you if we just let people break in, or like, yeah, sorry, they broke in. It's like, okay, but you set up the environment for this to happen.
Yeah, and I would say it's not compassionate on either side. And camping that's not how a compassionate society treats its most vulnerable population. And I'll give you just one example of how dangerous this can actually be. I was on a police ride along We stopped within 5 minutes. And when I say ride along, I'm with the bike cops. Like I'm actually pedaling my bike along with the police officers.
Do they have pedal assisted bikes? Do they have like electric? They need to get pedal assisted. They could go so fast.
No, you know what? These police officers are in good shape.
In good shape. They're good.
They do not need pedal assist. And
they understand ridge to river trails. They are.
They not only do they pedal fast, and I had to pedal to keep up. They then go bushwhacking because what happens is these encampments are building up in the undergrowth near the Boise River. You can't see them from the green belt necessarily. They're down closer. And so we had to hike in and see where these encampments are being built. Most of Boise doesn't even know these exist. It's hidden. It's been tapped down. It's been said it's not a problem. But within 5 minutes on my first ride along, we arrive under a bridge and there are 6 or 7 people sleeping there. I think there were 7. And the police officers, the first thing they do is they get ID from everyone.
If they have it, right?
Yeah, all these people had ID.
Okay.
And they will run their card and see who they are and what they're doing because you can't sleep there under the bridge. And the police officer there were 6 men and 1 woman. The woman was probably between 18 and 22 years old. She's sleeping next to these 6 men. They run the cards. 3 of the men are registered sex offenders. One of them has $100,000 bail on his head. Like he I think left Oklahoma. $100,000. That is not normal. I don't know what sex crime has been committed that a registered sex offender has skipped $100,000 bail, but they arrested him right away. But this young 18 to 22-year-old girl that I was talking to had been homeless less than a week and is sleeping under the bridge with this. This is horrible. This is not okay in Boise. We cannot let this happen. We have to make sure that we stop this. And, this young girl, I don't think she knew any better. I don't think she knew because there were other people. There's camps all over. People are in tents and in sleeping bags. I don't think anyone had told her, hey, there's a women's shelter that's less than a half mile away where you can have a warm meal and you can have someone that's going to help you get a job and they're going to help you figure out your life. And you do not have to live like this. But we were just accepting this. We're just tolerating this behavior. And I have had enough. And it is horrible for the people that are experiencing it. No one should have to live like that. And it's also horrible for the people that are trying to interact and work in a business and live. Because oftentimes with these homeless encampments, and not this specific situation, but crime and drug use is rampant in these encampments. And so unless we pull apart the encampment and say, go get the help you need, go get the housing you need, then we are encouraging crime right here in this beautiful capital city with a beautiful green belt, with a lively and busy recreational community and business district. And after years of working with City of Boise and this falling on deaf ears, we had to do something. And this is the answer. And it's a gentle touch. This is a gentle touch. We're letting Boise, we're going to let our mayor, she knows the city, she knows her people. We're going to let her address it how they feel is best. And hopefully her solution will work. I am cheering for her 100%. And if her plan doesn't work, I have several solutions in mind. But I'm hopeful that we can have a real change here in Boise.
Senator Galloway, I don't know that there's much else to say. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming in and talking about this. These are really, really horrible things. I will say I have a very dear friend who's used to work in the fire department in Orange, the state there shall not be named. And he had many experiences with homeless encampments, and he said that they went to one once that was roughly 200 people collectively, and what it was an encampment of men and then a collection of women that were like made up this other encampment. And they had an economy of sorts going on where men would supply food and drugs and women would supply, exactly what you would think. And he said in going through this, there was a trailer of some sort that somebody, or like some kind of like square thing where some people were sleeping, and they found a young woman in there. I think she was like 19 and she weighed like 85 pounds. And he went on to describe in greater detail what was happening that I will spare you from. But again, we think of very frequently we think of compassion as something, we think of homeless people as like dudes, right? You see a lot of men, and it's hard to rouse sympathy for, like, at times for some people, it's hard to rouse sympathy for, some scruffy looking guy, and it's like, well, he needs to get it together. And we largely say that about men in our society anyway, like, get it together, man. Right. But it is that juxtaposition where it's like, yeah, but if we allow these types of things to happen, you will have women that are abused and suffer enormous trauma and things that we would never tolerate in society. And it's happening away from us, right? And we're talking rape and abuse and all of these terrible things, and they're down on their luck and in terrible positions and don't feel empowered to go to law enforcement and say, like, hey, these 3 men horribly took advantage of me, right? And they keep her drugged up, and it's just, again, I couldn't agree with you more. That's not compassion.
These people need help. They need help. And this legislation is intended to make sure that they get the help that they need, and that we do not allow people to live like this. It's just unconscionable. And I mean, and I could go on. There's little children that live in cars. I can tell you all kinds of stories about those too. These stories are heartbreaking. And we can do better here in Boise. We can stop this. There is nothing compassionate about letting people sleep on the sidewalk or sleep in their cars. We need to get them to shelter. We need to get them the help that they need. And the way we do that is with law and order and making sure that we have a plan. So,
thank you for coming in today. Thanks for what you're doing for Idaho. Let's do this again.
My pleasure. Have a great day.